All right, welcome back to the PCC podcast. And today we are talking about a topic that you're not going to know that you needed, but after you listen to this episode, you are going to be so thankful that you listened. And that topic today is self compassion. Yeah, you're cringing just at the thought of it, right? So when I work with high achievers, because that's pretty much our entire niche is women who have like really just succeeded with a lot of things their entire life. They've been go-getters, they've pushed themselves to the brink of exhaustion, burnout because they were chasing a career that they wanted, they were chasing the family life that they wanted, and just go, 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 right? And they're givers and they give to others before they give to themselves, and they struggle with doing the same for themselves. And a lot of that comes from the lack of self-compassion. So self-compassion, I think, for high achievers is something that you think of as like, oh, I should be nice to myself. And most of the people that we work with initially have a very visceral reaction to that. They think, oh, be nice to myself. That sounds like making excuses. That sounds like being complacent. It sounds like things that I don't actually want to do because it's going to hold me back from my goals. And in today's episode, we're going to explain why self compassion is actually a massive unlock to success rather than something that holds you back. So, what is self compassion? It is, you could summarize it as being nice to yourself, but it's actually much more detailed than that. So, self compassion is comprised of three different components. Number one, mindfulness. Number two, self kindness. And number three, common humanity. And so these three components make up self compassion, help define it for what it is versus what it's not. So, for example, mindfulness is being able to recognize your thoughts as thoughts, but not something as truth. So, for example, if you think of you are sitting on a riverbank and you're watching the water go by, do you see the water and just jump in with it and let the current take you down? Or do you just sit on the riverbank and watch? This is mindfulness, where you are the version of you sitting on the riverbank, and the water is your thoughts. So your negative thoughts, your self-critical thoughts, the things that you're saying to yourself that you really shouldn't be because they're really mean. Do you jump into the water? Meaning, do you accept those thoughts as truth and just let it ride and let it control you? Or do you recognize that they are thoughts and they do not have to be true unless we allow them to be, right? So we can sit on the riverbank and watch. Number two is self-kindness. Okay, so this is being kind to yourself the way that you would be to a friend. Kind of relates to what I said about what these thoughts are comprised of. It's typically our inner critic. It's typically us being really mean to ourselves. And if anyone in your life talk to yourself like the way that you talk to themselves, like the way that you talk to yourself in your head, would you let them do that? The answer is most likely no. You're probably going to smack them in the face and say, why are you talking to yourself like that? Right. And that is self kindness, is treating yourself the way that you would talk to a friend, right? You would tell them, hey, like that's totally ridiculous. You are not a failure. You are not X, Y, and Z, right? And you would point out all of the good things about them, right? And then common humanity is number three, is recognizing that you are not a special snowflake that is broken beyond means and everyone else is fine. Common humanity is understanding that everybody makes mistakes and that you are not alone in your struggles. Because the number one thing that we want to do when we are feeling hard on ourselves is to isolate, self isolation, right? And so we think, I must be the problem. I must be broken. Something's wrong with me. When you really zoom out, like if you ask yourself, truly, am I the only person on planet Earth that is going through what I'm going through right now? The answer is no. And so recognizing that you have that common humanity with people allows you to give yourself some kindness because you're no longer isolating and believing that you are this broken thing and everyone else is doing fine, right? So those three things make up self-compassion. And the reason why I believe high achievers mistake this concept for complacency or self-neglect is because we've never been taught how to be kind to ourselves and hold a high standard. So, for example, if we are faced with the scenario of having dessert in front of us, right? And we go ahead and we eat that dessert and we eat too much of it. And we're starting to face some guilt and some negativity and some negative self talk towards ourselves. So, what self compassion I think most people perceive it to be is saying, it's okay that that happened, let it go, and it's okay if that happens again, basically, right? Or they might mistake it for like, oh, I'm feeling really bad right now. I need to be nice to myself. So I should have more of this ice cream, right? And basically in the process of making the decision. And when in reality, self-compassion is kind of just a post hoc process. It's looking back and forgiving yourself for what has happened because we cannot control the past. And being kind to ourselves for, things that we cannot control. And this is the key piece here, things we cannot control, right? So that does not mean when I am tempted to have dessert that it is a free pass because I need to be nice to myself, right? In that situation, I still need to be looking at the dessert, looking at my goals, asking myself what is like truly the best decision for me right now that's in alignment with my goals and my self-care. And if I do end up making the wrong decision, I will express self-compassion to forgive myself for the fact that it happened, but not let myself off the hook, right? Not say, oh, it's okay completely. It's I forgive myself for the choice that I made. However, I know I can do better, right? And so really a big piece of this is like forgiveness and acceptance is if we do not accept what has happened, it will be impossible to move forward. I see this a lot in women who have been stuck in patterns for years and years and years, or they've gained like a large amount of weight. The reason why is because if we do not accept our reality, then we're constantly going to be fighting with reality. Meaning, if I am struggling to accept the fact that I am 50 pounds overweight, then I will consistently bombard myself with shoulds, shoulda, coulda, wouldas, living in the past and not in the present. And living in the past doesn't actually do anything for your present or your future, right? Because you're just arguing with the past rather than saying, you know what, I'm here now. I accept that I am what I am right now, and I will take action now to better my future, right? So the key step here that most people are missing is self-forgiveness because we are mad at ourselves for choices that we made that led us to an unfavorable place that we don't want to be. It's frustrating. It is. Allow yourself to feel that. Allow yourself to be angry. Allow yourself to cry. Allow yourself to be sad. Allow yourself to be upset. Allow yourself to grieve that. At a certain point, you have to forgive yourself. It's literally like the 7 stages of grief. Like you have to go through a bunch of different emotions to get to a place where you can finally accept, okay, this is my reality and this is what I need to do about it, right? And that's how we move forward. Now, when it comes to differentiating, how do I make aligned choices for myself in the face of negative self-talk, negative mindsets, etc., and be kind to myself, but also act in alignment with my goals? This is a really helpful heuristic that I've taught to a lot of clients that has been super helpful, is the difference between self-care, self-comfort, and self-indulgence. So a lot of times we think like, okay, be nice to yourself. That just means like have the ice cream. That just means have give yourself time off the gym, whatever. When it's like, okay, if you really look at the context, this person hasn't been consistent with their diet or their exercise for weeks. Why are we letting ourselves off the hook, right? And so this is a way that you can differentiate between different kinds of self-care to see, okay, how can I be honest with myself here? So self-care is moving the needle forward on your goals, doing things that you don't necessarily want to do, but are important for you to move forward with whatever it is that you're working toward. Self-comfort is neutral. It is not going to move you forward or backwards, but it is something that is going to soothe you in the moment. And lastly, self-indulgence is going to move you backwards. And this is a choice that is not helpful, but is a coping mechanism, right? And so when you really ask yourself, like, I need to be kind to myself, what kind of choice do I want to make? We can differentiate these into 3 categories. Self-care. I did the hard thing even though I didn't want to, and I felt better afterwards, right? I went to the gym, I tracked my food, whatever it was. And while it was hard, it had a better payout at the end of the day and moved me towards my goals. Self-comfort could be something like, I'm on my period, and instead of like eating a bunch of chocolate and ice cream, I curled up with my favorite book and a warm glass of tea, and I read that, and I like treated myself to that like romanticized moment. Or I co-regulated with my pet, like I cuddled with my pet versus self-destructive behavior, right? Things like that. And then self-indulgence would be like, I was feeling sad and I ate the ice cream, right? Even though it was over my macros, outside of my goals. And so this is where we can separate these things and ask ourselves, like, truly, am I practicing self-care, or am I accidentally mistaking that and practicing self-indulgence and moving myself backwards, right? So these 2 concepts I think are really, really important for high achievers, because we've always been taught like, oh, give yourself grace, right? But then I see that just totally pendulum swing to the opposite side of the spectrum of people learn to give themselves grace, but then they lose standards, right? They lose the standard of how they actually want to look and feel. I see this a lot with people who have like restrictively dieted before, who then say like, I can't restrictively diet for my mental health. I need to just, not track food. And like they take a break, but then that break becomes forever. And then they're afraid of tracking their food in the name of self-care, when in reality, at some point it turns into self-indulgence or self-sabotage, because now they're not seeing the numbers that they need to see. They're actively moving backwards. They're frustrated that they're not seeing results because they're eating healthy, but nothing's happening, but they have no handle on the data. And so at a certain point, that goes from something that was meant to be self-comfort, right? Of just like neutral, let me just take a break, moved into self-indulgence, AKA self-sabotage, because it turned into, giving themselves so much of a pass that it's like, I'm just not going to look at the numbers. And that's hard to hear, I think, for some people, because a lot of us, like, we struggle to get back to a healthy relationship with something like tracking food after it's been very disordered. But it is totally possible with the right mental frameworks and tools and guidance. And this is something we bring clients through all the time. Literally almost every single person that comes to work with us like doesn't really want to track food because they've had a disordered past with it. And the way that we go about our habit scaffolding and things like that, by the time it's time to bridge into tracking food, our clients are just like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about doing that already. Or like, they have already started tracking some things because they were curious, and they're doing it from a place of like wanting to know rather than restricting. So it's really, really cool how we can rewrite that story. But that's just one example. So remember, when it comes to self-compassion, I think the biggest rule of thumb is giving yourself grace comes after the action, not before, right? It's not an excuse. It's a way to move forward. So if you are in the middle of a decision, we're not exercising self-compassion there. We're exercising critical thinking and decision-making skills. And then if we make the wrong decision for whatever reason, okay, forgive yourself and move on and make a better choice the next time. Because if you dwell in the past, then you're just going to stay there and stay stuck. So I hope that this was helpful, gave you a different lens on self-compassion and how it can actually be useful for you, and how acceptance and self-compassion are the critical keys to change and can be hindrances of change if not in place when you're ready to make a change to your lifestyle. So when used correctly, right? Asterisk, when used correctly. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please give this podcast a rating and review if this helped you, or share it with someone who you think that this could help. And we will see you back here for the next one.